de lembrar a todos que as perguntas para as sessões, elas devem ser feitas pelo aplicativo do Congresso. No mesmo aplicativo do Congresso, nós temos um ícone de avaliação do dia de hoje. Nós gostaríamos muito de ouvir todos vocês, então, por favor, se vocês puderem responder à nossa avaliação, o nosso agradecimento a todos vocês. Muito bem, e agora para abrir a sessão 5, Security Payments in the Digital World, e apresentar o nosso próximo palestrante, eu gostaria de convidar ao palco o presidente da Elo, Eduardo Chedid. Bem-vindo, Eduardo.
Não, né? Sim. Boa tarde, gente. Tenho a honra aqui de apresentar o nosso próximo palestrante, um palestrante da Mastercard, que vem falar sobre mais esse tópico de tecnologia. O nome dele eu vou agora mudar para inglês, é o Edgar Aguilar, Group Executive de Enterprise Security Solutions da Mastercard Operations and Technology. He's a technologist with a great experience in telecom industry and electronic payments. Então, por favor, Edgar, bem-vindo.
Thank you for that introduction, Eduardo. Boa tarde. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. I want to start by thanking Marcelo and the rest of the leadership team for putting together an outstanding program. And I've been fortunate enough to do this around the world, so I can tell you, you guys had a really good group of people looking after the industry. It's a real delight. Before I jump in the topic at hand, I wanted to get a sense of the audience. Would you mind raising your hand if you currently have a technology role or you have a technology background? I'm trying to gauge, again, don't be shy if you're an engineer or you have one of those cool degrees that you don't want to talk because you're a business guy, but you have a math major or computer science. Okay, so don't be scared because I'm not planning to turn this into a technology tutorial. However, given the topic at hand, I need to talk about some of the technology forces behind both security and digital convergence. And perhaps the most significant force that I can imagine and you can come up with is, no question, the Internet of Things. So I'm going to talk about that for a few seconds. What is interesting, by now, I assume that you have heard pieces of the story in terms of the number of connections in the Internet. If you think about the numbers are mind-boggling. We're talking about between 10 billion to 11 billion connections today, and the projection is to 40 billion to 50 billion, skyrocket in 10 years. Equally important is the impact in terms of number of users. Today we have about 2.5 billion users connected to the web, and in 10 years that number will double to over 5 billion human beings connected in the Internet. So we're living this today, right? It's exciting times. We can see those new payment channels right in front of us, new payment flows, new consumer experiences, tremendous amount of opportunities, also tremendous amount of disruption, not only in our space, but pretty much in all industries. And you can bet that with 50 billion connections, a lot of things will change. So this is one of the takeaways from my presentation. I would like you to remember that in the next 5 years, we'll see more changes in the payment industry than what we have seen in the previous 50. And that had some serious consequences. So back to the Internet of Things. Basically, what we're seeing is a shift from physical to digital at all levels. Again, people are moving away from offline type environments to a connectivity that is 24/7. And every device is, in essence, a commerce device. It's no longer your computer and your smartphone. Now we're talking about your car, your fridge. A lot of things have sensors that could carry signals and eventually could be used for payments. It's very exciting stuff. And as I said, people are connected in ways that we couldn't imagine. For instance, this picture I took on a recent family vacation. I was focusing on the cool Bob Marley t-shirt. When I came back home, I blew it up on my iMac. I realized that pretty much all the locals that I wanted to capture in the background, they were not paying attention at all to anything but their smartphones, and a young lady had her own laptop. But that's the image that we see everywhere. You just step out in the street, this is what you're going to see as you see people waiting for a bus or a train. So that's the new norm. The Internet of Things basically is also a great example of collaboration. As a lot of things that have happened, it's not necessarily an accident. A lot of people have been working very hard, including the telecom industry, internet service providers, device manufacturers, computer and storage companies. And what is very interesting, because a question came in the previous session, something that we cannot ignore is the value and the need for standards. And I don't know if you know the story, but the internet was running out of gas, so to speak. And that was because the founding fathers of the internet, led by Sir Tim Berners-Lee out of his team in CERN, came out with the addressing scheme that they thought was more than sufficient for what they had in mind. And think about it from this perspective. The internet was almost running out of IP addresses. As a matter of fact, they ran out of IP addresses in the mid-2000s, but thanks to the collaboration of the telecom industry and others, they were able to develop a new standard called IPv6, which solved for that issue of addresses. So you can tell your teenager kid back at home, don't worry, you'll be able to connect all your toys because I heard that there's sufficient IP addresses for you to go at it. Now, think about the progression in terms of connectivity. When the internet was unveiled and there was some kind of a big splash in 1982, it was very low-key. There were only like 1,000 computers connected to this new way of communication by the end of that year, just 1,000 computers. It took a decade or 10 years to get to 1 million connections. And as I said, nowadays we're talking about 10 billion to 11 billion connections, sensors, IP addresses, etc. So it's fascinating. Again, we can see where this is going, but I would like to do this. I'd like to use a short video to share with you an image of Internet of Things that you can take home. And this one is courtesy of my friends of Cisco. So let's go ahead and play the YouTube video, please.
This is the cat that drank the milk and let in the dog that jumped on the woman who brewed the coffee.
Brew coffee.
That woke the man who was late for work.
All right, I gotta go.
And drove the car
Driverless mode engaged.
that found the parking spot
Find parking space.
Parking space found.
that alerted the door that opened the control room,
Hey, Bob.
that secured the data, that directed the turbines, that powered the sprinklers, that watered the grass, that fed the cow, that made the milk, that went to the store, that reminded the man to buy the milk. It was poured by the girl who loved the cat, that drank the milk. The Internet of Everything is changing everything. Cisco, tomorrow starts here.
All right. So where I come from, any presentation that has a cat on it, by definition, is a great presentation. All right, so, okay. With that said, on a serious note, we are on the footstep of the third wave of the internet. The first one happens to be fixed line. Again, I talk about it in 1982 to 1995 or so. Then there was a second wave, which was driven by mobility. And now we have the third one, driven by this massive amount of connections, Internet of Things. This is also a key element in terms of what experts call the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0. As again, we can see how the Internet of Things is blurring the lines between physical and digital. And that's even more true in our space, in the payment space, enhancing the life of people everywhere. So as I said, now we are in this era in which it feels like every week, every day, there's a new idea popping up in terms of a new payment channel, a new payment flow, a new consumer experience. But I will argue that those new payment channels, new payment flows, and new experiences, and all the opportunities in the world are irrelevant if we cannot find a way to provide peace of mind to our customers and to protect their data and secure those payment channels. You see, because the hard reality is that at the end of the day, the Internet of Things, while it brings a lot of value, it's not all about unicorns or rainbows or puffy clouds. As a matter of fact, there's a number of bad actors that are trying to figure out how to take advantage of vulnerabilities. They're scanning your companies every day. They're looking for a backdoor to get in, and they're trying to figure out how to do the most damage in terms of capturing your customer data and your intellectual property. So that's the reality of the Internet of Things. And therefore, we need to recognize there's a new risk profile with this and new security challenges. With that said, data privacy and security should not come up at the expense of economic growth and innovation. As a matter of fact, it should be quite the opposite. Data privacy and security should be instrumental in driving both economic value as well as innovation. And a balanced approach that could ensure the use of data in a free-flowing, responsible, and secure manner is the way to do it. And that's what MasterCard advocates, a balanced approach. And I'll be talking about this throughout my presentation, because one of the key takeaways is for you to think about this in the context of a layered framework, CAPAs, and more like a program instead of thinking about some of this stuff as a project. So where this is heading, let me use somewhat of a thought-provoking statement. Statistically speaking, payments have never been safer. However, criminals have never been smarter, and the noise around cybersecurity has never been louder. Let's take a look at each component of that statement. First, payments have never been safer. The incidence of fraud is currently lower than the historical ratio of somewhere around $5.7 US for every $10,000 spent. Now, this brings flashbacks of my days in graduate school, and I remember this very precise college advisor, professor who taught me, careful with statistics because they could be deceiving. In this case, in this statement, what we need to understand is the denominator, meaning the total number of transactions, continue to grow at a very fast pace, mainly driven by the boom in e-commerce. So therefore, we need to avoid getting a false sense of security in terms of how we're protecting our data sets and our payment flows, because criminals have never been smarter. They're more sophisticated, they're more patient, and they're more specialized. In particular, the methods used by cyber hackers proven to be quite a challenge. And by the way, with this shift from physical to digital, there are new risk profiles that are emerging. Some of them are right out scary because they point to potential catastrophic losses. I illustrate the point with one case that maybe some of you have heard. It was a little bit over 2 years ago, December 2013, a well-orchestrated brute force attack on a debit portfolio on a single issuer out of the Middle East resulted in losses of over $42 million. Criminals drained multiple ATMs in 10 different countries, all at the same time. Just put it this way, over $4 million were in duffel bags just in the first 5 minutes. And cases like that one, as well as the well-publicized account data compromises, is the reason why the noise around cybersecurity and fraud has never been louder. You see, data breaches have become increasingly common, and now they're extremely well documented in the media. That adds to a cloud of suspicion and fear around the security of payments. So some of the questions that you might ask are, where do we go from here and how do we attack this problem? I will argue one important question is, how do we cut through the noise and avoid overreacting? Make sure that you remain laser focused on trying to find the right solutions, sustainable plans that could support your customers in terms of data privacy as well as data security. Now, let's take a look at the evolution of fraud. But before I jump into the evolution of fraud, we need to understand the evolution of consumers. And back to my introduction on the Internet of Things. And that's because as we see this shift from physical to digital convergence, also reflect a huge shift in consumer and shopping behaviors. Consumers are moving away from in-store to online faster than ever before. And as such, much more likely, the future of fraud will center around cyber hacking. It's just simple common sense. But we have data and evidence to show that's what's going on. You see, counterfeiting represents today about 50% of the total global fraud. But at the US market finally jumping on board with DMV and transitioning to chip cards, we would expect that to drop very quickly. And again, given that counterfeiting card is becoming increasingly hard to do, and there's a lot of new technologies that are help make that tighter, combined with the fact that consumers are shifting to online transactions, again, fraudsters are moving away from the traditional card to, again, the weakest link in the chain, which is e-commerce. And I'll talk about some of the spots and ideas in terms of how do we stay ahead of this. Now, if you think about behind this narrative, there's an underlying principle. Those of you with more than 10, 15 years in the industry probably feel a little bit of deja vu. And that's because we all should know and fear that the problem continues to be how to protect account information. It's not different from what it was 20, 15 years ago, and we have made a lot of progress in protecting physical POS type transaction flows. But we have to do this again in a different channel. And when you think about it in that light, it makes it a little bit easier to think about the solutions. but make no mistake, there's not a silver bullet. Again, that's why I sharing with you our thoughts in Mastercard in terms of looking at this as a layered framework. Now, it wasn't a long time ago, the only place where you can find card information was printed actually in front of that card. And nowadays it's everywhere. You find it in retailers' databases, it's present in smartphones, smart devices, and actually is floating around in the internet in the unsecured channels such as unencrypted connections. So that's a problem. So as we look ahead at this, and the entire industry is moving very fast to come up with great solutions that are leveraging every possible form factor of consumer technology device, we must keep in mind the security requirements as a design and guiding principle. And therefore, whether you have a technology role or not, I need you to make sure that you drive that conversation, because we need to drive this at an industry level, not necessarily for the risk management team or information security to come up with the answers. So one thing that we also need to consider in terms of which one are going to be the winning solutions in the future is the consumer experience. And in the case of Mastercard, we feel very strongly that we need to enhance that experience, not just at the moment of the transaction, but before and after. And a seamless security process is definitely a good start for that enhanced experience, whether it happens to be in store or online. One of the Mastercard's main goal is to drive that level of security across all devices and channels. And because we cannot choose how customers transact, we must secure all channels. And one thing that we also keen on and very focused as part of our security goals is how do we maintain and improve acceptance levels in the digital space. In this sector, the transaction fraud is 3 times higher than card not present. And equally important is to recognize digital has the lowest acceptance rate and also is the fastest growing segment. According to our data, the global approval rate for online transactions is somewhere between 82 to 83%, which is not necessarily great when you compare 96% for card presence. As many of you probably know, that number is significantly lower here in Brazil. So that's another call for action for all of us. How do we help bring that number up so we can enhance the economic value for everybody in this room and in our companies, as well as merchants, and more importantly, enhance the consumer experience? So that's clearly a call for action. With the boom of e-commerce, the industry pretty much have been forced to advance the security and integrity of the payment processes for both digital and physical. Now, as I said, the digital space is lagging the physical POS progress, so we need to figure out how to narrow that gap very, very fast. Because as I said, there's some serious pain that we're creating on consumers, and there are tons of opportunities in terms of creating value for our shareholders and our companies.